Former Army Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl will not serve any prison time for deserting his post in Afghanistan. That is the ruling today from a military judge. Bergdahl will be dishonorably discharged. The judge also reduced his rank to private and issued a fine. During the campaign last year, President Trump called for Bergdahl to be executed. In the spring of 2009, you'll recall Bergdahl walked off his military post in Afghanistan. He was captured by the Taliban and held prisoner for 5 years. He was released in a prison swap authorized by President Obama in 2014. Mark Strassman was inside the courtroom for the decision, and he joins us now from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Mark, so no prison time for Bergdahl. Is this a surprise?
Well, it's certainly a surprise, I think, to people who believe that Bergdahl deserved to get a whole lot tougher sentence than that. This sentence is bound to be extremely polarizing. On the one hand, you'll have people who believe that Bergdahl, by virtue of spending 5 years in a truly grim, horrific condition in a Taliban cage in the middle of Afghanistan, there are folks who believe he has suffered enough, been punished enough. At the same time, of course, and this is particularly true among many veterans and among many active duty personnel, they see Bergdahl as a guy who walked off his post in the middle of a war zone, who put fellow soldiers at risk in the frantic hunt to find him after he disappeared, who believe that Bergdahl deserved a whole lot more time than he's going to get, which is no time whatsoever. The sentence, in effect, means the time served is the time he spent in that Taliban cage. He'll be busted down to a buck private. He'll lose some money. He'll have a dishonorable discharge, which means he forfeits all benefits, and he has that stigma that he carries with him into civilian life. But beyond that, this is over for Bowe Bergdahl in a sentence that was very, very quick, Vlad. When I was standing in court and he walked in, he was Bergdahl was extremely tense. The judge asked the defense table, the lawyers, and Bergdahl all to rise. There was a woman lawyer on either side of Bergdahl with her hand on his back, bracing him for whatever was to come. And when the judge very quickly got to the pronouncement of sentence, you could just see everybody just exhale. One of the attorneys was crying, and Bergdahl, who looked so grim coming in, looked so relieved as he walked out of the courthouse. We're still waiting for him now, Vlad, to leave the courthouse behind me. There's a car waiting to take him out. We've been waiting for more than an hour now for him to actually exit the courthouse. But a number of people are going to have very divisive responses to this in some cases. And what everyone's looking for, too, is to see whether President Trump will have something to say about this. As you know, Vlad, he has been very outspoken, both particularly as a candidate and then now as the commander-in-chief, of how he views Bergdahl. He called him, as a candidate, he called him a dirty, rotten traitor, essentially said he should be executed, a firing squad kind of approach. And that would greatly upset Bergdahl's lawyers, and frankly, it seemed to upset the judge, too, who said that he would take the president's comments into consideration in this sentencing phase. Well, Vlad?
Yeah, Mark, you may not be aware of this because you've been working all morning long, but the president has been tweeting from the plane from Air Force One on his way to Asia, and he just recently tweeted the decision on Sergeant Bergdahl is a complete and total disgrace to our country and to our military. So we now know how the president feels about that. It hasn't changed much from when he was a candidate. How did the judge then explain his decision?
He didn't. There was no explanation. There was a simple pronouncement of sentence. I mean, the whole sentencing decision, the hearing this morning, was over in 2 minutes. He got right to it, announced his sentence, which we've been talking about. There was a brief question from one of the defense lawyers, and then court was adjourned for the day. There was no explanation whatsoever. I will tell you that Gene Fidel, who is a civilian defense lawyer for Bergdahl, talked about President Trump and his comments afterwards. He tried to be restrained about it, and then basically talked about how unhelpful those comments were, how prejudicial those comments were. And in fact, Bergdahl's defense team is now going to push in an appellate court to vacate even today's sentence altogether. And they truly believe that then candidate Trump, now the commander-in-chief, his comments were prejudicial and should have been kept to himself, particularly once he became President of the United States.
You know, that's really interesting, Mark, because there's some question as to whether or not the president's comments in the wake of the New York City terror attack this week will also affect how the judgment, the trial of the accused killer. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We do have a little bit of an idea based on what we just witnessed today, Mark.
Yeah, in fact, that was the first thing I thought of, Vlad, when I saw his response to the New York terrorist attacks, and his comments was, well, it's just like the Bergdahl case, that he's interjecting into this into a justice case, and what the consequences of that will be, Vlad, I guess we'll have to see.
Absolutely, and of course, what the suspected killer in the New York City terror attack did was way worse. In other words, innocent people lost their lives. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in court. Mark Strassman reporting for us from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne Division. Mark, we thank you.